This video does not confirm or diagnose any medical condition. Any references to health are merely alleged and discussed in the context of general commentary. Y'all, Hollywood is shaking right now, and it's not because of a breakup, a diss track, or a leaked DM. Jaguar Wright claims that the business has been covertly shielding a group of A-list males following what she describes as a risky series of private choices. Connected to Teyana Taylor, Jaguar didn't whisper during a chilling live session. She named names. She pointed directly at Eamon Shumpert, suggesting he was the first to realize something was music seriously wrong. Then she mentioned Drake,
her ex-husband. She made him the bad guy. The divorce would have never even been out if he didn't file the motion to use our full and legal names. Then she had to go and she had to get new energy. What was she calling him? Her apple pies? Have you seen my apple pies? Did you see my apple pie? Oh my God, you did a love scene with Leonardo DiCaprio.
How was it shooting those scenes with Leo?
It was just work.
Chris Brown, Aaron Pierre, even Kanye West, and shockingly, Leonardo DiCaprio, all allegedly tied together through the same hidden pattern. This wasn't about romance. According to Jaguar, it was about taking a chance, keeping quiet, and who is shielded when things go wrong. She claimed that following specific private incidents, Hollywood went into lockdown mode. Attorneys were called in, NDAs were signed, publicists rewrote stories, and all of a sudden, people's behavior changed, anxiety increased. Relationships ended abruptly and without warning. Fans noticed disappearances, projects were delayed, and emotional breakdowns occurred. In actuality, however, Jaguar claims that it was never intended to make headlines. She claimed that anyone who appeared unstable later on was subtly discredited. Not because they lied, but because truth made them dangerous. This isn't a scandal. It's a warning to the industry. According to Jaguar, what she revealed is only the first fissure in a wall that has been concealing something much larger. Deceived her former spouse. She turned him into the villain. If he hadn't filed a motion to use our full and legal names, the divorce would never have been finalized. After that, she had to leave and find fresh vigor. What did she call him? Her pies with apples. Have you seen my apple pies? Did you see my apple pie? Oh my God, you did a love scene with Leonardo DiCaprio. How did it go to film those scenes with Leo? It was merely work. Hollywood has always been better at concealing damage than preventing it. So fasten your seatbelts. What unfolded during Jaguar Wright's live session wasn't chaos. It wasn't rambling. It was intentional. Take your time. The kind of delivery that suggests someone understands the weight of what they're saying and knows exactly why it stayed buried for so long. She didn't open with drama. Silently, she opened. The kind of silence that exists when powerful people agree not to speak. That silence, in Jaguar's opinion, shielded reputations while letting others fall apart in silence. She claimed that for years. It's a troubling pattern involving Teyana Taylor and a number of well-known men with careers in sports. Music and film was discussed in private within the industry. Jaguar presented it as a tale of danger rather than romance. Decisions made behind closed doors that carried consequences far beyond feelings. Consequences that, according to her, were never disclosed clearly to everyone involved. And once concerns surfaced, the response was not transparency. It was damage control. Eamon Shumpert, she claimed, was one of the first to notice that something wasn't quite right. Not publicly, not dramatically, but in ways people close to him noticed later. Changes in conduct, circumspect dialogue, and separation where familiarity was once present. According to Jaguar, that moment marked the beginning of a pattern, not an isolated incident. More names came up as her life went on. Aaron Pierre, Kanye West, Drake, and Chris Brown. Each name carried more weight not because it was an accusation, but rather because it implied that these people shared a common thread of controlled silence and undisclosed risk. Then came the name that caused the room's temperature to change. DiCaprio, Leonardo. Jaguar did not make direct accusations against him. Music didn't have to. The mere hint of closeness carried enough weight for listeners to comprehend the potential scope of the purported network. According to Jaguar, once private alarms were raised, Hollywood responded the only way it knows how. Before talks took place, lawyers were consulted. Publicists shaped narratives before emotions were processed. Non-disclosure agreements became shields, not safeguards. She asserted that there were communications, papers, and insider confirmations that were carefully kept where only a few individuals could access them rather than being leaked or made public. She claimed that this information clarified a number of things that fans had long wondered about. Projects go unnoticed. Relationships end without explanation, delayed. Artists and actors withdrawing from public view under the vague label of personal reasons. According to her, those reasons were never personal music. They were strategic. Jaguar spent significant time discussing Aaron Pierre, describing him as emotionally unprepared for the environment he entered. She alleged that after certain relationships ended, his demeanor shifted in ways that couldn't be explained by heartbreak alone. Confusion, anxiety, emotional dependence, and the kind of internal conflict that comes from realizing you were part of something larger than you understood. She suggested this wasn't weakness. It was an industry warning sign. According to Jaguar, when individuals show visible distress after private situations like these, the industry does not offer clarity. It isolates them. Their reliability is quietly questioned. They become a liability due to their emotional state. Not publicly, but through whispered conversations that slowly dismantle credibility. She claimed the same distancing happened with Amon Shumpert. Subtle separation, no scandal, no headlines. Invitations ceased, connections cooled, and the energy shifted. To the public, it looked like ordinary relationship fallout. According to Jaguar, it was something else entirely. She described a silent infrastructure designed for containment. Private discussions and well-crafted advice from insiders who never write anything that could be used against them. Reputation managers coordinating with legal teams. She claimed that accountability was not the aim. It was containment. Containment of panic. Containment of liability. Containment of questions no one wanted asked out loud. Jaguar claimed Teyana Taylor remained in constant motion during this period. Work schedules packed tight, travel nonstop, public appearances stacked back to back. She asserts that movement produces noise and stillness invites scrutiny. Noise music distracts. Noise shields. Relationships terminated suddenly. Just distance. No explanations. No closure. When whispers began to surface online, they disappeared just as quickly. Blogs were hesitant. Journalists paused. Stories were reviewed by the legal system and never came back to life. According to Jaguar, access was used as a weapon. Speak and you're frozen out. If you continue, you'll be inundated with attacks on your credibility. She claimed collaborators and peripheral figures were quietly advised to keep their distance. Music, not because they were guilty, but because proximity itself became dangerous. This, she claimed, had nothing to do with morality or feeling. It was about maintaining control. Throughout her life, Jaguar made one thing clear. She was not speaking to destroy careers. She said she was speaking because people were left, emotionally fractured while the machine continued to operate smoothly around them. According to her, silence crossed a line from strategy into something unethical. She framed the issue as a systemic failure, an industry that silently sacrifices trust to maintain the illusion in views. Human consequences as a loss that is acceptable as long as the brand endures. As her life drew toward its end, Jaguar didn't issue threats. She gave cautions. She said more names exist, more documentation exists, more connections exist. What the public has seen so far, she implied, is only the surface layer of a much larger structure. Hollywood is not facing a gossip crisis. It is experiencing a crisis of trust. Furthermore, career-ending secrets are not the most harmful ones. They are the ones that follow people home and reshape their lives in silence. What she exposed didn't end when the live stream cut off. Jaguar Wright claims that what was said aloud was never the most disturbing aspect of allowed was never the most disturbing aspect of the narrative. This was what everyone already knew and chose not to challenge. She described how once the initial concerns surfaced privately, the industry didn't panic. It worked together. Phone calls replaced text messages. Without calendars, meetings took place. Advice was given orally. It was never documented. This was not about responding to a scandal, she said. It involved carrying out a well-known plan created for situations where power is threatened by exposure. She alleged that certain individuals were quietly encouraged to take space to recalibrate their public presence, to disappear just long enough for narratives to be rewritten. The answers were prepared for any questions that came up. Creative burnout, emotional weariness, scheduling conflicts, and straightforward justifications for complex situations. And the people in the middle of it all continued to move. Oh, music. Teyana Taylor never slowed down during the most delicate time. According to Jaguar, projects overlapped. Appearances remained polished. The image remained intact. According to Jaguar, movement wasn't ambition. It was a tactic. Inspection is encouraged by stillness. Momentum overwhelms it. Behind the scenes, she alleged others were processing something entirely different. She returned to Aaron Pierre, suggesting that what the public interpreted as mood changes or distance was something deeper. Confusion without context. Anxiety without answers. The kind of emotional strain that comes from being told not to ask questions only to comply. Jaguar claimed that when individuals expressed discomfort, they weren't confronted with truth. They were managed. Their reactions were framed as instability, their concerns as overreactions. According to her, this framing served a purpose. Once someone is labeled unreliable, their words lose power. She claimed that this covert discrediting frequently occurred through opportunities that abruptly vanished. Missed calls, delayed responses, and subtle professional distancing rather than outright smears. Just enough to isolate, nothing overt enough to pose a threat. She said that Amon Shumpert was surrounded by the same pattern. It's just a gradual withdrawal from areas where questions might be addressed to freely, no allegations, no public fallout. To fans, it looked like a private life recalibration. Jaguar implied it was something else, a protective perimeter forming. This perimeter, in her opinion, went beyond relationships. Quiet warnings were sent to collaborators. Associates are advised to keep conversations light. Everyone in close proximity was considered a controllable variable. She claimed that the names Drake and Chris Brown came to light due to private overlap rather than public occurrences. Overlap that, according to Jaguar, was never meant to intersect with transparency. She emphasized that individual behavior was not the problem. It was the quiet that ensued. Then there was Kanye West. According to Jaguar, the industry reacts even more aggressively when someone who has previously been classified as unstable enters such circumstances, to safeguard the structure rather than the individual. She claims that unpredictability jeopardizes controlled narratives, which are essential to maintaining one's reputation. She implied that this is why certain voices are amplified while others are muted, why some breakdowns are handled discreetly while others become a public spectacle. Who can be contained is more important than who is speaking the truth. As she continued, Jaguar shifted focus from individuals to infrastructure. She described an unspoken hierarchy of crisis response. Legal advisors arrive first, followed by publicists and reputation consultants. Only after narratives are stabilized do emotional considerations enter the conversation, if they enter at all. According to her, non-disclosure agreements are not just legal tools. They are psychological ones. They isolate people in addition to silencing them. Once signed, individuals are left alone with experiences they're not allowed to discuss, even with those closest to them. Because people internalize when they are. Unable to communicate, she asserted that this isolation was the most detrimental result of all. And when they internalize, they fracture. Jaguar claimed that even before the general public realized something was wrong, journalists sensed it. Tips showed up. Questions were drafted, but stories stalled. Editors hesitated. Legal departments intervened. According to her, access was subtly leveraged, pushed too hard, and doors closed permanently. Blogs stopped posting. Investigations were closed. The internet, which usually thrives on chaos, strangely moved on. She remarked that this was not coincidence. It was influence. Fans saw patterns that didn't quite add up as rumors started to circulate on social media. Sudden breakups without explanation. Projects delayed indefinitely. Public figures vanishing at moments that should have been career peaks. Jaguar claimed these weren't random events. They were symptoms, signs that a system puts continuity ahead of accountability. She made it clear that this wasn't about villainizing one woman or absolving powerful men. It was about highlighting how quickly human experiences are downplayed when they pose a threat to lucrative images. She claims that some people were told either overtly or covertly to stay while being counseled to seek private counsel. Silent speaking would be inconvenient. Not because it would be wrong, she framed that silence as coercive. As her live progressed, the tone shifted from revelation to warning. What she disclosed, she claimed, only touched the tip of the iceberg. That the names under discussion were a part of a much wider network. That documentation existed not just in messages, but in behavior patterns, timelines, and sudden shifts the public dismissed as coincidence. She cautioned that harm multiplies covertly. Once silence becomes the norm. In the end, Jaguar responded to the unavoidable criticism. She admitted that people would label her as unstable, resentful, and attention-seeking. She said that label was expected and useful because when truth comes from someone already dismissed, it's easier to ignore. But she insisted that ignoring the story wouldn't make it disappear. She said the industry is already feeling the pressure. Internal, not public. Trust has cracked. Conversations have changed. Now, people are keeping a closer eye on one another. She claims that secret loses some of its potency once it is named. She ended with a statement that felt less like closure and more like an opening. This isn't about ruining careers, she said. It was about confronting a culture that treats people as expendable once they stop being convenient. A society where being honest is frowned upon and remaining silent is praised. She cautioned that more information would come to light not because she wanted it to, but because systems built on secrecy eventually fail. Hollywood, she said, is entering a moment it can't fully control. Furthermore, cancellations or headlines won't cause the worst harm. It will come from the realization that trust was sacrificed long before anyone was told the truth. And once that realization sets in, no amount of image management can put things back the way they were. After the stream ended, that insight persisted. It became comfortable, according to Jaguar. Right? Once silence cracks, it doesn't shatter loudly. It leaks slowly through behavior, through timing, and through the small decisions that suddenly stopped making sense. She suggested that what people were witnessing afterward wasn't backlash. It was recalibration. She described how, in the days that followed, conversations across the industry changed tone. The length of meetings decreased. Language became more cautious. Familiar alliances felt strained, not because anyone had been publicly charged, but rather because everyone knew what it meant to be named in a system that depends on deniability. Jaguar suggested that the reaction was instantaneous but undetectable. No statements, no denials, no legal filings meant for headlines. Rather, a tightening of circles, strategic distance, and internal advisories. This is how power defends itself, she claims, when exposure endangers structure rather than image. She went back to the concept of proximity and how being close to a story like this can be just as harmful as being inside it. She claimed that some collaborators abruptly and silently left projects. Others refused to show up. No one responded to the invitations. It was calculation rather than panic. She presented this as a loyalty stress test. Who doesn't say anything? Who asks questions? Who becomes inconvenient? According to Jaguar, this is where reputations are truly decided. Not on stages or screens, but in private rooms where access is currency. She suggested that some individuals chose safety over truth, while others found themselves unexpectedly isolated for hesitating too long. She made another reference to Teyana Taylor, but this time she did so as a metaphor for how quickly narratives are safeguarded when profit is involved rather than as a caricature. She alleged that the image never cracked because the machine around it worked flawlessly. Music, every public move was precise. Every absence was explained. Every question was redirected. According to her, this wasn't accidental. It was practiced. According to her, the effects were felt most keenly by those on the periphery. People who couldn't afford to be misinterpreted, those without strong enough teams to protect them. They were perceived as unstable when they hesitated. They were accused of being unreliable when they withdrew. She returned to Aaron Pierre, suggesting that what looked like a quiet retreat was actually survival. She claims that it takes ongoing self-editing to survive in a setting where speaking is discouraged. Every word turns into a risk analysis. Every silence becomes strategic. She described this as psychological erosion, not dramatic collapse, but slow depletion. Caution takes the place of confidence. Compliance takes the place of curiosity. Jaguar argued that this is how systems maintain control without force. You don't silence people directly. Speaking becomes more expensive than remaining silent. She proposed that variations of the same pressure were felt by Amon Shumpert and others. No confrontations, no ultimatums, just an understanding that proximity to certain questions could narrow future options. Most people don't need to be threatened, in her opinion. They only need to see what happens to those who aren't careful. She widened the lens to include the media ecosystem. She claimed that reporters sensed the story's gravity but recognized the professional risk. Sources went cold. Multiple confirmations that could never be recorded were demanded by editors. Legal departments raised concerns not about accuracy, but exposure. She explained how stories quietly fade away due to a lack of consent rather than a lack of truth. According to Jaguar, the public often assumes silence means nothing happened. She argued the opposite. Silence, she said, usually means too much happened behind closed doors. She asserted that the deeper story was unaffected by the surface-level drama on social media. While the main issue remained out of frame because it was never intended to be seen, fans fought timelines, conjectured motivations, and argued personalities. She presented this deception as deliberate. Give music people something smaller to fight about and they won't notice what's being protected. She alleged that Drake, Chris Brown, and Kanye West became part of the conversation not through public incidents, but through shared silence. According to her, when multiple powerful figures avoid the same topic, it's rarely coincidence. She was careful not to assign guilt. Instead, she emphasized responsibility. Accountability for systems that put continuity ahead of clarity. She spoke about agreements designed to protect brands that end up isolating people. About advice that sounds supportive but ultimately discourages truth. And about how quickly concern turns into management when profit is at stake. Jaguar argued that this is why trust erodes quietly, not because people are lied to directly, but because they're never told enough to protect themselves emotionally. One thing she said was undervalued by the industry memory. Fans recall going missing. Inconsistencies are remembered by audiences. Press cycles are short-lived compared to patterns. She claims that containment becomes more difficult once people begin making connections. Not impossible, but fragile. The next stage wouldn't be explosive, she cautioned. It would be cumulative. Unscripted moments that deviate from official narratives, small confirmations, and subtle shifts in music. Instead of framing this as a threat, she presented it as inevitable. Silence-based systems eventually run afoul of themselves. As she moved toward closing, Jaguar acknowledged the personal cost of speaking. She said she expected backlash, character attacks, and questions. About motive, she welcomed them. According to her, Discrediting the messenger is easier than dismantling the message. However, she maintained that the tale was not her own. It belonged to the people left confused. Silently, the populace moved aside. The people asked to move on without understanding why. She described this moment as a reckoning, not driven by outrage, but by exhaustion. Exhaustion with watching truth filtered through legal language until it no longer resembles reality. She said the industry could have chosen transparency early. It didn't. Additionally, the price has increased. Instead of issuing a warning, she concluded with a reminder that fame doesn't erase consequences. That silence doesn't erase memory. Impact is not eliminated by that control. Jaguar claims that hashtags or headlines won't determine what happens next. Whether or not people continue to accept partial truths as complete explanations will determine the outcome. And once that acceptance ends, the structure that depended on it begins to weaken. Enough to alter everything that comes after, but not all at once. At this point, the narrative ceases to be entertaining and begins to serve as a warning. Because what you just heard has nothing to do with celebrity, unhealthy relationships, or secret betrayals. It concerns the consequences of treating trust as a disposable asset and rewarding silence over the truth. It's about how easily people can be managed, redirected, and emotionally discarded, when protecting an image becomes more important than protecting human beings. A faceless system did exactly what it was designed to do. It absorbed the shock. It diverted focus. It isolated the damage. And it moved forward like nothing ever happened. However, those trapped inside it found it difficult to move on. They were left with unresolved issues, broken relationships, and a reality that could never be explained by a public declaration. This is the kind of betrayal that doesn't scream. It lingers. It reshapes how people trust, how they love, how they speak, and how they stay silent. And here's the part nobody wants to admit. These kinds of stories are so shocking that they don't endure. They survive because they're familiar, because we've seen versions of this play out again and again with different faces. Different headlines and the same ending. Silence wins, and the truth pays the price. However, silence is only effective when people become distracted. So, if this story made you uncomfortable, that's the point. It wasn't intended to make you feel safe. So, if it made you furious, perplexed, music, or emotionally uneasy, that's why. A part of you is aware that there is more to this than what has been permitted to come to light. Which is why you are still here listening. It's not over yet. There is a pause because there are more specifics. More connections exist. And once trust is broken at this level, it never fully recovers. If you're ready to keep watching what they don't want discussed, the truth only vanishes when everyone decides to stop. Therefore, stay put, subscribe, be vigilant. And don't turn away. And don't turn away.